Unheard.
Welcome, everyone, to the sixth episode of Unheard. It's been a while since we put an episode out, but this one is special and it needed some time, some thinking, and it needed to find the right person to answer the questions that we're going to answer today. The topic that we are discussing today is the relationship between fear and education. We see fear as one of the biggest cogs of the wheel of education. And to discuss this, we have a really cool person with us. We have Kamala Mukunda. Kamala, welcome, welcome.
Thank
Uh,
you.
we have Kamala, who has been a teacher for 29 years, has been teaching at Center for Learning, CFL, a really inspiring learning space, teaches psychology and math, and has written this amazing series of books called What Did You Ask at School Today? And we're really happy and excited to have Kamala with us today. And she's going to be faced with some tough questions, some difficult parts of the education system that we usually like to avoid or not discuss about. But before I start, Kamala, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. As I was telling you earlier, what I respect about you and your team is that you are willing to ask these hard questions, like you said, something that cuts to the root and the bottom of the problems in education, and not just, the fixing, trimming the branches kind of approach. I found that very good. So I want to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. That's very generous. Uh, Talking about trimming the branches, we see fear as that scissor that has been trimming the branches of human or children's imagination. We will talk about fear from different perspectives. Let's start with the fear that begins even before the child is born. The fear of the past, the fear that is carried over generations and generations and generations. We see that a large part of how children or people make decisions in their lives are based on burdens and dreams and imaginations passed forward by the previous generation, by parents, by the society of yesterday, by the politics of yesterday, and so on. Uh, and these fears sometimes push children to see education purely as a way to fulfill the dreams of someone else, as opposed to an experimental space where they can find their own dreams and their own aspirations. What do you think about that? Have you experienced or have you seen the burden of past fears in children around you?
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. I think that's true that children are born into a world of their parents' fears. And when I say parents, I don't literally mean just mom and dad, but like you said, broader society. They're born into that world. They haven't a clue how it's going to impact them. Uh, just before we say that though, I just want to point out that part of fear, and if you want to call it the fear of the past or the fear that's been passed down, part of it may be a kind of intelligence in the sense that I don't think that nature intended us to be without fear. I think it's a question of what kind of fear and the role of fear in one's life, right? So utter fearlessness would not last very long. An organism wouldn't last without the what we could call the right kind of fear, to the right stimuli. Now, our world today, or let's say for the past several hundred years, is really different from the world that our brain evolved in. Okay, so the kinds of fears we evolved with, which would allow us to live intelligently, that's not around us anymore. Physical fears, right? What's left in its place are very different kinds of fears, unlike uh, unlike a leopard that could jump out at you from a bush, and so you are careful, you're alert, you're watchful, and when the danger is past, you're fine, right? Unlike that, we face fears that are almost continuous, simmering all the time, and the brain and body don't have time to recover and to breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, that danger is past. It's never ending. And since we're talking about education, we can stick to children. If you just think about their school years and the kind of continuous pressure to perform, to prove themselves. And even if I take only in academics, which is, by the way, not the only source of stress for children, right? Not only academics, lots of other we can talk about. That's unrelenting. It's never going to go away. And thanks to what you were talking about, one's parents and past generations' hopes and dreams that need to be fulfilled through every new child, these fears are not even going to end when school ends. It's just going to go on, and then we're going to pass it on to the next generation, right? So there's a kind of unrelenting nature of this kind of fear that isn't what we were born to adapt to, and this is not what we adapted to. Our bodies are not meant to take this kind of thing, and this turns into what I guess we would more familiarly call stress and anxiety, which is not something that the brain and body were designed for. Leads to all kinds of problems, both within childhood and beyond. So it's a huge sickness. If you ask me, what's the most serious problem? It is fear. And if you look, fear underlies many of our other ills, social ills, right? Like ambition, greed, a lot of it, if you look, scratch, and look down at the bottom, there's a fear. There is some fear, whether it be of missing out, of loss, of not being somebody, like I have to be somebody. The fear of being a nobody, my God, what all that drives in us, no? So
And
it's a
what's
huge problem. Yeah.
I wanted to ask what is reinforcing this fear? I mean, I see that um, I've actually felt that a lot of parents recognized that they were sort of passing on these fears, but also
Yeah.
still they could not do so much about it.
Yeah.
Something keeps reinforcing that
Yeah.
that fear, the imageries of the past or whatever. So what has been your
I think even a loving parent, when they fear for their child and for their child's future, I don't think that they are equipped with the kind of imagination that would help them step out of it. So it ends up reinforcing or getting passed on. I'm afraid for my child's future. So that fear gets displaced onto the child, right? If suppose I stopped, I've seen this in parents who are not worried about their child's future, not because they have a big bank balance and they will give them, not for that reason, for other very different reasons, then the child's fears are not reinforced because the parent is clear. You will do something, my girl or my boy. I'm not worried for you. I'll be there to support you to the extent possible. Universe is a good place. Relax. Such children's fears are not reinforced. You can see it. And we cannot blame parents for this because they are caught in it themselves. They don't have the imagination, maybe, or confidence to step out.
Yeah, and the tough part of this, I see learners who come to Nooks, and I see that parents change over time and they start recognizing these fears, and they start wanting um to support their kids, but then they're faced with this sort of the neighborhood problem, right? So you see all these other people and they walk up to them and say, but how come you're not worried about what your kid's doing? How can you let your child be free? And a lot of times, this sort of pressure is coming from a need to sort of self-justify their own actions. But it's really hard. So I can really empathize with parents who who want to, but it's very hard when
It feels irresponsible, and they are told that they are being irresponsible, in fact. Right?
And especially in a country like India, where
especially in India. I understand where you feel things are very competitive.
and and you, I think we have we're really kangaroo parents, right? We really want to make sure that we are very good parents. Like we cannot fail in the idea of being a parent. Um, yeah, this is quite love, quite interesting, and I think we'll come to how all of this can break. But let me move on to the second part, which
Mm,
I feel are the fears of the present, the in the moment
mm,
experiences of fear. And I'm sure you must have noticed this in your classrooms or
mhm,
in other classrooms, and you might have seen how one way of handling it, differs versus another.
mm,
Um, but what are these fears of the present that children will feel,
mm.
and not just children, maybe the people who are in and out of the education system will feel
Yeah.
in this moment in time.
Yeah. So, Abhijit, are you talking about the kinds of daily fears that a child in a typical school might be experiencing?
Yes, I
Something
can
like
take
that?
example. Uh, I mean, I'm remembering from my classroom.
Mm, mm.
I think one of the biggest fear was of being humiliated.
Yes.
So let's say you forgot to bring your textbook,
Yeah.
and so you would not just be told that, well, this is bad, you forgot to bring your textbook.
Yeah.
You might be told that how
Mm,
terrible a person you are to not
yeah.
be able to remember such a simple thing.
Yeah.
And that would be, so now I have to bring textbook, not because I understand why I should bring the textbook, but
Yeah.
because I just don't want to be humiliated. And this is a
Yeah.
very in the moment. It's present. It's
Absolutely.
neither past nor future.
Yeah. I don't know if I can say this, but I honestly feel there's one kind of application of fear to motivate learning, which is part of the system.
Mhm.
But then that there are these individuals, teachers, who I mean, I have experienced like you. I don't understand what it is, Abhijit. It's one thing to be part of a system that uses fear, but it's another to actually wield it yourself as a weapon with a child. And that, when I think back to teachers that I have also known, or sometimes our students tell us, in my previous school, this is what the teacher did. I feel they are unwell almost. I feel these people are in some ways suffering. I cannot
Mm.
explain otherwise how they could
Yeah.
do this to children, right? It's not a matter of ideology, it's cruelty. So I'm using the word. Yeah. So if a child is in a situation where the adult is like that, it's you're at the mercy of a person who has power over you and who can show you up at any moment, right? And it's irrational, like you said. No, there's
Yeah.
something irrational about the kinds of humiliation that children are put through. But on the other side, there's the fear of the system. In the sense, the system assumes that the only way a child will learn is through the motivation of fear, through applying fear.
Yeah.
And of course, fear takes the form of punishment,
Yeah.
but it may also subtly take the form of reward. By this, I mean, sometimes the school environment will say, no, we only do stars. We
Yeah.
don't do any punishment, right? But if you look again, you look closely, the fear of not getting the star, the fear of getting fewer stars, the fear that I got stars till now and one day I might stop getting. So nobody is spared actually. Even the so called topper is not spared.
No.
No position is, that's an uneasy position,
Yes.
like being on the top. So that application of fear, why has that come about? I mean, what it feels like for the child, one can imagine, no? They're always tense, anxious, as I said earlier. I think it comes because we don't truly believe that children will enjoy learning something. So we feel we have to use some other method. Okay. It's something like training a dog. I know that the dog is going to want to do this wrong thing. I can't use reason. I can't explain to my dog. So I have to whack his nose with a newspaper, right? Now, where the heck did we come up with this idea that children, human beings, can't understand the reason for doing what, for
Yeah.
This is the reason why you should do your homework. This is the reason why you should bring your textbook to class. It's simple, rational. Right? So we have seriously underestimated children's ability to understand their the purpose of what they're doing. That's one part of it. And the other is, it is true that a typical school curriculum contains a lot more than the child might be curious about, right? Till they're about age 6 or 7, they're curious about so many things. And when they come to school, we're like, whether you're curious or not, you're going to learn all this.
All of
And
this.
it's a huge amount, right? And then we wonder, where did the curiosity go? Where did
Oh,
the motivation go? Well, obviously, it's
yeah.
not. So
No big
we have
surprise.
to, yeah, we have to have some sympathy for this child.
Yeah.
Who I don't think I would change the school curriculum too much. Yeah, we do nowadays. Society is such, we have to learn X, Y, Z. So many things. I wouldn't change that, but I would give some credit to this young person for understanding why they have to do what they have to do. Of course, don't overburden them.
Yeah.
And don't use fear. It's so demeaning. And competition, by the way.
No.
Competition is supposed to be so good, no? It's the way that
It's the way.
even competition is a kind of coercive control. No, it is finally. You're asking the person to do something for some other benefit. That means you're bypassing the reason or the need to just do it.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
so many wrong ways of thinking, actually.
No, it's I love the way you put it. I mean, we did one little social experiment some time back. I think we were in Delhi and we were planning on starting a new project.
Mm.
And in those days, I mean, we don't create nooks inside schools, but we were willing to experiment in those days. And before we did that, and there was a bunch of young people with whom we were going to do this, and they were all very excited to work in education and very excited to, work inside the school. I was less excited, but we said, okay, before we do this, how about we spend 1 week in the classroom as a student? And your only condition is that you have to come in the first 1 hour of the classroom and spend time in the classroom, and you will do whatever some other student is asked to do. So it doesn't matter if the teacher doesn't tell you to stand up on the bench, but if she tells somebody else to stand up on the bench, you will stand up. And
Nice.
if you are asked to leave, if they are asked to leave, then you will leave the room. If they're asked to shut up, then you will shut up. And let's do 7 days of this, and then we will start. Nobody could continue past day 3. Everybody stopped. And we asked, what happened? Like, can't take it. It's too much. It is. I'm not only being humiliated, I'm being humiliated without reason. Nobody's explaining why, what's the reason for me to bear this punishment. I'm just being punished. Because you don't even think I'm intelligent enough to understand the reason for my own punishment. There's something very deeply colonial about this habit. I feel that there is something very strangely colonial about the not even thinking that the person you exercise power over has the capacity to understand, forget make decisions, but even understand the realities around them. And then it just so happens that in this case, it's children. 100 years ago, it was, British versus the Indians. Somewhere in between was men versus women. And in all of these cases was the colonial habit of not feeling that the other person is as much a person as you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of what is it? Anthropocentric
view. Yeah.
And yeah, we've done that. We've systematically underestimated children's abilities to understand, to reason, to think. I mean, this whole blank slate, no, is one. We think they come in blank, huh?
And you mentioned about the two the systemic fears and using it as a way to see success, but then also adults taking it too far and adding things to it.
Yeah,
for no
exactly.
good reason, which
Yeah,
does. I feel that though the because the entire reward system is so much based on fear that
yeah.
you know the starting point, but of course there is no ending point. So
Mm,
uh, I have seen, for example, teachers who started off in the school I went to. They
mm,
started off as very passionate and very loving and very caring. And over the years,
mm, mm,
you could see that because they are rewarded only every time they
mm,
are able to manage the classroom, they're able to
mm.
bring discipline to the classroom,
Yeah.
and they're able to make people quiet, and they're able
Mm,
to push their marks up.
mm,
That's when they were getting their rewards. And therefore,
mm,
they
mm,
started taking it further. They started,
mm.
holding the stick a little bit harder. And after uh,
Yeah,
but then there is nothing that tells you where to stop. So some
yeah,
people will go very far,
yeah.
and then you have to think of a policy to bring in
Mm,
to cut it short and say, no, no, you can't
yeah,
beat kids. But why
yeah.
did they start in the first place?
Why did it
Because,
start?
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I have often wondered when parents hit their kids and they'll say, you have to, otherwise he won't learn. But if somebody else were to hit your kid, you'd be so offended, right?
well,
I don't know maybe the one tight slap was a very good old model of parenting. But did everybody who did that, did they learn it from their elders? Maybe that's just you watched it happen, spare the rod, spoil the child, then you justified it, or is it an emotional outburst?
yeah.
Like you were saying, if a teacher is frustrated, afraid actually that she's losing control of her class, is that when she resorts to these things? Kind of a.
I think that there is a funny little brain activity that helps you do this,
Hmm,
which is the compartmentalization of trauma.
hmm,
Uh,
hmm,
what when we did this social experiment I told you about, and we were
hmm,
just debriefing and discussing,
hmm,
um, people said that they started, even though in 3 days, not it wasn't that bad,
hmm.
not because the teachers were also not trying to keep themselves quite under control, so it wasn't that
Obviously,
bad.
yeah.
But it unlocked that little box that they had put in the corner of their brain,
Hmm.
which was the experiences of childhood, which now
Yes.
they have locked and kept away,
Yeah.
and completely forgotten. And now they
Yeah.
justify those experiences
Yeah.
as, no, it has made me this positive person that I am. Right?
Hmm.
So all the beating from parents, all the
Hmm.
abuse from teachers, all the
Hmm.
um, uh, you know, terrible
Yeah.
experiences,
Yeah.
you push them away, and then you say, no, 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 all of that, without
Yeah.
going deep into it, all of that
Yeah.
was somehow helpful, because if it wasn't, then
Hmm.
I'll have to confront that trauma, and I'll have to
Yeah.
actually see how it damaged me.
You're right. You're so right about this because sometimes, because our school is an what in quotes alternative
Yeah.
school, sometimes people will say, why alternative school? I went to a normal school. I turned out okay.
I
I
love
think you're
this.
so right. I
I
mean,
hear
I'm
it all
not
the time.
saying you didn't turn out okay, but look at the rest. Look at the society we've created.
Yeah.
Look at that. And we
Uh,
are
I,
creating.
we do this with our when we are hiring people.
Hmm.
Uh, one of the interview questions sometimes is, many times is, uh, we tell them that to go back into their life as a 13-year-old and to answer
Hmm.
the rest of the interview as that child and not as
Nice.
the adult that they are today. Because as the
Hmm.
adult, you
Hmm.
start framing this notion that now you know
Hmm.
what's good for children,
Right.
and so you're able to ignore a lot of bad
Hmm.
stuff
Yeah.
with the single justification that was good for me also. So it
Hmm.
must be. But if you go back to being that
That's so
13-year-old child,
interesting.
you know,
How does that work out
it
when
works
they?
out. It's a very emotional process
It
because
is no. Yeah.
suddenly their answers start changing,
Yeah.
and you see that what they said before,
Yeah.
and now what they say,
Yeah.
now it's coming from their position as a 13-year-old.
Hmm.
Maybe they weren't thinking that, oh, this system is great for me to be a
Hmm.
great employee one day. Maybe they were
No.
thinking more like, okay, why did my teacher say this to me?
Yeah.
The, the
Exactly.
the the reality of experience is very different when you see it
Very different.
post the event many years later versus when you experienced it right then.
That's so true.
And
I mean, just now when you were saying this, I was thinking of my, I don't know if it was 13, but 8th standard. Yeah, roughly.
roughly,
And suddenly a picture flashed in my head of my teacher, our teacher. She had this thing of partiality. Remember that word? She was partial to one or two. Okay. And that ache, it just came into me just now when you said,
yes,
go back. I felt it as an ache because
yes,
I would never be that.
yes.
You know, it's
And
just like,
it's 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 so fragile, that compartment.
yeah,
It breaks open really fast.
yeah,
We see that people end up crying and talking and
yeah,
just, but if they are able to unlock it, then they're in a position to work with kids, because now they can empathize
yes,
even just a little bit.
yeah,
But if they can't unlock it, then then no amount of
yeah,
skills are going to help, because you just can't see it from the lens of the learner. You're always going to be the educator, not from the learner's perspective.
yeah,
Ooh, wow. This is fun. Very,
yeah.
very difficult, honestly. Like, even I, when I talk about it,
Mm.
I'm saying things to you, and then my mind is fleeting back into that
Yeah.
time, and not just my experiences, but what I
Mm.
saw around me.
Mm.
You could see so much happening.
Yes, yes,
You could see systemic bullying, you could
yes.
see encouragement for
Mm.
uh, this fear to keep carrying on. Uh,
Yeah,
you could see people's personalities breaking down,
yeah,
their sense of self,
yeah,
and then now that I've seen them grow, I've seen so many of them take decades to recover from it.
yeah,
And still going on.
yeah,
I still see myself as not fully recovered.
yeah.
You know, uh,
That's an honest appraisal. As you say, many people will say, but I'm fine. No? Not
far
realizing
from it.
what it has taken.
Okay, so
Mm.
that brings me to the juicy part, which is the most recognized, I think,
Mm. Mm.
fear, or I must say, it is the most misrecognized version of this fear, which is the
Mm.
fear of the future.
Mm.
Um, and I don't think I have to even explain it, right? There's so much.
Mm. Yeah.
The moment you say fear of the future, everything
Mm.
floods in.
Yeah.
The future of the how the country will shape, the future of how, whether you'll have a job or not, the future of
Yeah.
whether your skills will matter or not, the
Mm.
future of what families are going to look like, and will you take care of your
Mm.
parents or not, like, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all flooding in. And
Yeah.
I noticed that we tend to see all of these fears as different things.
Mm.
I
Mm.
have a feeling that they're like kind of all rooting from the same place.
Mm.
So what has been your relationship with fears of the future? Let's start there.
I'm thinking, as you're saying it, I was just looking to see what is fear of the future. One is like we say it's unknown. But if it was really unknown, then I don't think I would have fear. The problem is that I think I know. I have pictures, and those are what frighten me. I have projections, like I'm projecting something scary. Okay, yeah, my parents will suffer. I'm not saying their future is unknown, actually, right? So I think these pictures are one thing, and what puts those pictures in our head, I know it could be the media, it could be just social, other people. I see somebody else whose parents are suffering, and I immediately think of my parents. But for a child, if I were to go, let's go back to children for a bit. You must have heard of this notion of child as human capital.
I hate it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
really, right?
Piggy banks, I call
I
it.
I think I think that willy-nilly we are many people are looking at their children and their education as an investment, like I'm investing in this child's future. Now, if I look at it like that, obviously the question of the return comes in. Okay. And the return it's financial, but it may be also emotional. I've heard people say, after all I've done for you, that kind of thing, the emotional
Yeah.
investment into the child. So there's very little hope for a child to just be in the present, just live in the present, and to enjoy the present, right? Because there's either emotionally or financially, I'm being seen as somebody who has to give back or prove myself, or be a success, as defined very narrowly, by the way, what a success is. So I think fears of the future for in schooling are mostly because of that. I wanted to share with you that it
Mm,
has been a beautiful, beautiful book I read
mm,
by a person called Emily Rapp, RAPP. So she's an author, but she's written this very few books. One beautiful.
mm,
She had a son, and after his first year of life, he was diagnosed with a disease that would kill him within the next year,
mm.
and there is no cure. So she realized that here she has this baby, and he has no future. But what do I do in the present? There's only love. And the book that in the book she describes so beautifully how full and rich their life was when all she had to do was love him and receive his love, right? And she would look around at other parents and she would find their whole way of talking so meaningless because everything was future oriented.
Mm.
The best this, so that, the best that, so that, so that. Everything was this, so that, that. And she couldn't take it because, her baby had no future. But it was the most meaningful parenting
Wow.
experience. She
Wow.
writes about it like that. And I have always felt like, why can't we all just, and she says actually, like, I hope this book will help those whose babies are not going to die and who are going to have a future to learn the love of the present moment and not to let that just go by. Sorry, did I get digressed? What were we?
No, 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 no. Wow. We will link this book with the
Yeah,
with this episode for sure.
sure,
This is
sure.
such uh, it's a very powerful example of the future being overbearing to the extent where your present time is almost what do you say in the financial language? It's written off. Your present day is written off.
Yeah, yeah,
And I feel that only a capitalist system
yes,
would create an environment
yeah,
which tells you that you are more human tomorrow than you are today. You're more
yeah,
useful tomorrow than you see the
absolutely.
kid like a fixed deposit, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
only going to be more useful
yeah,
20 years down.
yeah,
Today, you are just sucking money and
yeah,
consuming.
yeah.
And
And so also you suffer now so that,
ex-
for that future reward. That's
and
also,
I don't know if I've spoken about this in one of the previous episodes, but we had it was a very common, very famous thing around me when I was growing up. That
mm,
people would say that children are like mud. They are misshapen.
mm,
And our job as adults is to slowly shape them into vases, to give them the shape
yeah,
and form.
yeah,
And so, in effect, you you're seeing a child as incomplete
yeah,
today,
yeah,
and you see which is bad already. But then
yeah,
you think that you have the power and the capability to shape this person into something amazing one day.
yeah,
So finally, he will be complete. Finally, he will have rights, and finally, he gets to have a say and make decisions. And finally, he will
mm,
be happy and satisfied and
yeah,
uh, responsible and
yeah,
positive for the society.
yeah.
Uh, but of course, this doesn't happen.
It doesn't.
This
It
doesn't
doesn't happen. Absolutely. One of the things that I've learned in psychology, child development psychology, is that children's immaturity, what we call their immaturity, is actually uh, part of this niche. It's adaptive for this niche of childhood. Okay, I'll give you an example. For
happen.
example, uh, children have to learn through making mistakes. That is
Mhm,
what we evolved to do. Okay, So they try things with a lot of confidence. If you see, before a certain age, maybe 6, or actually coincidentally before they join for standard, they have overconfidence.
Uh,
I know, I got it. I can do. And even in the way they try things, like if you asked me to try something with as little experience as a child has, I wouldn't try. I would say, I don't know, I won't do it. Or, new, I haven't read enough, I can't. Yeah. But they have that. It's called a metacognitive deficit. But the word deficit, it's tongue in cheek, right? Because it's actually beautifully suited for their stage of life. But now you take this child who's out there in the world making mistakes as a way to learn and put them in a classroom where every mistake is frowned upon. And not only that, they're coming in feeling confident and like, I can do, and they are told you can't, actually, you can't. You are not adding. It's a tragedy, right? We're just
yes.
stamping on that spirit.
Yeah. No. I, I I think we have found several reasons uh, to not object to a child's unhappiness, um, and uh, and let that happen. Because if we see it objectively,
Mm.
um, and you see a human being very small in age, really cute, really
Mm.
uh, full of life, and you saw that child so dramatically being coerced into
Mm.
unhappiness,
Mm.
your natural reaction should be to prevent it from happening.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but we don't have that reaction.
Yeah.
We are not. We want to think that we are protective of children, but are we really protective of children? What are we really protecting them from?
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe we're protecting them from being happy as
Mm.
opposed to protecting them from
Yeah.
from the opposite of it. So
Mm.
this yeah, it doesn't make sense, but it's I think we get trained into it. I think that there's a reason
Yeah.
why school is so long.
Yeah.
It goes on for like 20 years. I think that's the reason, so that you if it happened too quickly,
Mm.
I always say that, like, if you saw a child in let's say in a kindergarten, and you
Mm.
went there to a kindergarten, and you see kids like jumping around, playing around, you
Mm.
don't feel anything is wrong with that, right? You feel,
Yeah.
yeah, they're kids.
Mm.
If you go to a 10th grade classroom and if you see again people jumping and playing around,
Yes.
immediate reaction is, oh, they're so uncivilized.
Oh no.
How come? How come these kids are
Yeah.
jumping and playing? Now you're okay with it because it takes 15 years to get there. But imagine if that happened overnight.
Mm.
Imagine if this person went from jumping and playing to
Mm.
keep sitting down quietly and
Mm.
listening to instructions and orders and not asking questions.
Yeah.
You saw that overnight, you would think this is some Russian, torture, or
Torture camp. Yeah.
something, that some
Yeah.
brainwashing. Because
Yeah.
how can you change a person so dramatically like that?
Yeah.
But because it is so slow, and
Mm.
that while the child is learning to accept it,
Mm-hmm.
the parents are also learning to allow
Totally.
it and enable
Yeah.
it, not just allow
Totally. I give you an example. NCERT
it.
recently, I think in 2022 or 23, they came out with a survey of over a lakh of children in different schools, government schools, private schools, rural, urban, girls, boys. And they gave them a questionnaire with some 10, 12 questions, which address things like, do you feel anxious about and what do you feel anxious about, your academics or this. So the questions were very yes, no, and kind of, because they collected a huge amount of data, not very useful, but even so, something like 60% of the children said that I am anxious about my academics. Okay. Now, the response to this is mostly, okay, we have to help them manage their anxiety. We need to train teachers and adults to spot the signs of increasing anxiety and do something for coping, basically coping, right? no one is saying there's something wrong with this. Why are 60% of the children? And I mean, the report is disturbing because in the beginning, it's like so, it's very, like you say, no questioning of the status quo. Not at all. There's no alarm bells ringing at all. And
I
to me,
mean,
I was alarmed. I was like, what? How is it you're just happily publishing and signing? I'm very grateful for the help of so and so and so and so in compiling this. What is happening here?
yeah.
But
I think to me, the final straw was when I started seeing that education systems or state systems were trying to introduce things like, for example, social emotional learning and happiness
mhm,
curriculums to rectify
yeah,
uh, the happiness deficit,
yeah,
again, without questioning that what the hell caused this
yeah,
deficit in the first place, right?
yeah,
So our policy-wise response to education seems to be that,
yeah,
okay, create the mess and then
yeah,
add another puzzle piece on top so that you
yeah,
clean that mess, but
yeah.
never prevent a mess from happening.
Mhm.
We really follow Western medicine in this format, right? Only
Mm,
cure and no prevention,
no
no
prevention.
thought
Mm.
of
No,
uh,
but but
changing
Abhijit,
systems.
what would it take? Like you might say, no, shouldn't the system do something? But the system is composed of you and me and
Yeah,
all these millions of people who whose fears are fueling the system. No, so if you were to ask, where can we fix this? You can go in at almost any point and do something
yeah,
about it. But really, what one needs is almost like a philosophical
yes.
sea change, almost like I don't know how to explain, like somebody who would speak to everyone about look at your life, look at the whole of life, look at what we're doing, look at one's own fears and what one is doing to others. So almost like I can't imagine policy alone fixing it.
No.
I
Mm.
can't imagine teachers alone fixing this. And maybe parents, to some extent, I feel parents are the most powerful in this because if enough parents said, you don't do this to my child,
Yeah,
and I'm not worried whether he gets 90 or 80 and all that, I think if that voice was strong, then schools would have to heed them.
yeah,
And then maybe that's a node for change.
yeah. I um I think I've often said this that the reason why the school logic is so powerful, the system has propagated for so long,
Mm,
is because it creates all the people it needs to propagate.
mm,
It
mm,
creates the attitude, the policy, the structure, the governance.
mhm.
It creates the parenting philosophy. It
Yeah,
creates the industrial philosophy, everything that
everything.
will reinforce it.
Yeah,
And that is why it's such a powerful system. It's not the best idea of a system, but
yeah,
it's still clever almost in an evil sort of a way
yeah,
where it can, it produces all the ingredients it needs to keep going on.
yeah.
Um, but
So you said evil, Abhijit. Who is the evil geniuses? I
huh,
cannot point to.
exactly.
No?
This is almost like a situation where, let's say, somebody programmed 10 robots
Mm,
and then programmed those robots to program 10 more robots, and that
mm.
it keeps going on. And
Yeah,
then the original programmer eventually
perfection.
dies. It's no
Yeah.
longer there. Now, this is the system.
This is what
Everybody's
we
a
have.
perpetrator and everybody's a victim.
Yeah.
Everybody contributes
Mm.
to it and everybody suffers from it.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, I think you're very right that what it takes is a new philosophy. It takes probably a new narrative
Mm.
of what education should be, could be, would
Mhm.
be.
Mhm.
Uh, but I would take even one step before that is I think it takes that unlocking of the trauma box and accepting that first
Mm.
of all it has damaged you. I
Mm.
have not seen so far
Mm.
anybody do meaningful work in education without having recognized
Mm.
that they were damaged first, because then your motivation is like
Yeah.
sky high.
Yeah.
Because it has damaged you. You can't just sit
Yeah.
by and watch.
Yeah.
But if it is only damaging others,
Mm.
then you feel that, okay, I have to do it for others. I'm doing charity. I'm doing
Mm.
for the sake of kids, for the sake of the new world.
Yeah.
But when it's you,
Mm.
then it's very personal.
Mm.
It's unavoidable. This discussion will never leave your head. And
Yeah.
so I think some of that, uh, some of that is this. But
Mm.
yeah, this is. I mean, I was going to bring it to to the question of what do we do. how do we,
Yeah.
or what does it look like? Let's say if we had to imagine
Mhm.
a non-fear based education, well, what would replace fear as the
Yeah.
fuel for the learning system?
Yeah.
What have you seen
Um,
in
I've thought a lot about this. I mean, the fact is that I have taught in an alternative school where we work on our own terms. So I can't, um, in a way, so I'm very fortunate, but
Yeah.
I've chosen to do that, right? But I have also worked with B.Ed programs, teacher training programs.
Yeah.
And I find that I many of us who work on designing those, we recognize that that's a point of perpetuation, what you're talking about. The teacher training program is a 2 year period of time where we really could turn the whole thing upside down, but we don't do it enough, hardly at all. The mode of that 2 years is the same as what the trainee has undergone in school and is going to do in future. That is one point where we could really change it around, not just educate on lesson plans and stuff like that, but deeply question the philosophy not only of education but of life, and and do it in a discussive format, right?
Yeah.
Dialogic, have lots of discussions, and hope that those modes become the modes of the classroom for those teachers. So that is one place. And like I said, another point for intervention would be parents. I think if parents got together and said, look, I don't want this kind of school, let them try to talk to the school and say, this teacher puts my child through this, I don't want it. If the school is unwilling to budge because perhaps there are other parents who don't want that, right?
Yeah.
Then why can't a group of parents get together and start their own school?
Yes.
They will that's how CFN started. It was a bunch of parents with about 6 children. So start your own school, and believe me, it is not. It is financially viable for people like us who have. We can afford. We don't need to keep on making more money on something else. It is possible, and then to open it up to more children and more families. Maybe we need more, imaginative
Yeah.
models of schooling. That's another place. Um, and like I said, you said we need a different philosophy of education. I feel like if our philosophies of life and living remain unchanged, then education can't really do
Bingo.
much, right? Can't you?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
some broader debates in society about what is success, what is the meaning of happiness, what is it really that we are all seeking. I come across people, adults, who at age 40 or 45, they say, I'm quitting. I've seen it's meaningless. And I feel I wish there was somewhere to gather that energy and
Yeah.
put it out there in the world for our young people to hear and say, oh, really? You
You can
mean
quit?
after busting my whatever for so long, I'm going to feel like this? Ugh,
Wow.
it
Yeah,
might be nice.
you're absolutely on point. Uh, I always found it very strange that when the UN talks about the SDGs,
Mm,
that education is just one bucket.
yeah,
Like what? But it's part of everything. Learning is systems are part of
yeah,
everything. To see it as just one little small independent piece is
yeah.
probably the mistake we make when we try to
That's right.
reimagine it.
That's right.
Because you can't reimagine it without reimagining everything that connects with it. Even if
Yes.
you created a couple of learning spaces, you have so many more things to change
Yeah.
for that narrative, the overall narrative to change, for the
Yeah.
overall ecosystem to change.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, and if you're gonna spend 2 to 4 lakh rupees anyway on your kids' schooling,
Mhm.
that's very much a good amount of money to think about starting your own learning space and
Yes.
your own
Yes.
um, you
Yeah.
know uh,
Mm.
and going off the script. I mean, you're going to
Yeah.
spend anyway that kind of money. So,
Yes.
but yes,
True.
yeah, I mean, to sum it up, I feel, yeah, there is the acceptance, then there is the sort of uh, yeah, taking a stance and making sure that no, I'm going to do something about it,
Mhm.
then believing that you can do something about it, and then
Mhm.
imagining what can be this new thing.
Mhm.
And honestly, we don't need to even have just one narrative. We don't need to
Mhm.
have just one way of schooling. And I think that's another
Mhm.
tragedy of schooling is that it just allows one way.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would not have a problem with schools if you had the choice to not go there,
Mm,
and
yes.
because you could choose, okay, I choose to go and pay fare, then you have made a decision.
Yeah.
But this is almost monocropping
Mm,
or monoculture, which is
yeah.
terrible. So I think there is, and I feel people who are listening to our discussion, uh, I hope that they don't feel that it's a hopeless situation, because it's
No,
actually not, because there's so
not
much
at all.
happening.
Yeah.
There's so much experimentation, and a country
Yes.
like India where the experimentations are off the charts.
Yes.
uh, I think we need to just support these experimentations, and
Yeah.
start either be an experimentation yourself or
Yes.
play a role in somebody's experiment.
Yeah. And
Um,
can I say one thing, Abhijit?
yeah,
When I've seen generations of our students go out, no,
yes,
alumni, I find it so reassuring that there is so much meaningful work that can be done, and they are doing fine. I mean, they're not in high shy jobs or anything, but they're fine, and
happy.
they're doing such meaningful work. That means all these opportunities are there, but
Yes,
most kids don't even know
they
that
have
it's
no idea.
possible to do. So yeah, let's end. It should be a note of optimism that there is a
Yes,
lot of interesting, fun, meaningful work out there for which you don't need to, go through a childhood of fear. No.
exactly. I will not say anything further. You have beautifully summed it. Thank you so much, Kamala. This was at some point I think I forgot we were recording. It was just a conversation at some point, and I really loved listening to you. And I'm sure everybody who's listening to this is going to find it extremely inspiring. Keep doing the amazing stuff that you're doing, and
You too, and your team. I'm so pleased that
thank
you're
you
that
so
you
much.
exist.
Thank you so much. I think we all feed off of each other, right? So
Yeah.
nobody exists in isolation. So
Yes.
beautiful to have this conversation.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.